Melbourne City was the final team I want to talk about on the pod today because I was fortunate enough actually to commentate that game, co-commentary on the collective. Cody's done some commentary with them too.
Hey,
With
funnily
with
enough,
our
the last game I did with them was Melbourne City against Macarthur.
There you go. And Jack, that was with our boy Seb O'Neill, of course, on the lead comms, cooking as he always does. Shout out Seb.
Sebo Neil TV returning soon.
Seb O'Neill TV returning soon, and like Melbourne City, that was probably the first time I'd actually seen a team this season for half of football actually throw Adelaide off their game and totally suffocate them. But they just couldn't do it for 90 minutes. And I mean, Yaya Takuli came off the bench and just seemed to change the game for Adelaide in the second half. The first 10 minutes, Adelaide just got totally on the front foot again and they got the goal through Archie Goodwin. And then after that, Melbourne City, like they've obviously got, and the question I wrote down here is kind of if their injuries are starting to catch up with them because they had that period about a month or so ago where they beat like Wellington at home, they beat West United at home, they were picking up a few wins, and everyone was kind of raving about how good of a job Aurelio Vidmar was doing with all these young players amid such a serious injury crisis. And yet a month later, we're sitting here now looking at three straight losses. They've had, to be fair, three games on the road in a row, losing to Auckland away, which is actually no shame in doing. A lot of teams are struggling there at the moment. They lost to Macarthur away, which is where I first kind of. Nick Cody, you were commentating that game, right? You just mentioned when they lost to
Yeah, I
Macarthur.
was.
Yeah. Now, that game there, particularly in the second half, was really similar to the second half they had on Friday, where they concede a goal. And then just after that, a team just basically sits in a low block. They put numbers behind the ball. And Melbourne City, despite having Marco Tilio and Nathaniel Atkinson, which they brought off the bench on Friday, they just couldn't create anything of substance. I mean, the biggest sort of red flag of like how bad that second half was the Ben Abraham, I think, was the referee. If I'm not, yeah, he was, if I'm not mistaken, and he basically blew the full time whistle just as Tilio had mishit a pass across the pitch to Ben Mazzeo, and it just kind of summed it up that for the last sort of 20 minutes, I don't think Melbourne City actually got the ball into a dangerous, excuse me, into a dangerous area or any sort of dangerous cross that threatened an Adelaide United defence that is, still got its issues, despite obviously the position that they're in. That was actually a rare clean sheet for Adelaide United, and I mean credit to them, they did defend pretty well. But I guess Lecky's come back. He got through 65 minutes. Tilio came off the bench. Honestly, didn't look great, but he's probably just still building his minutes. I think Aurelia Vidmar said Andreas Kuen is a couple of weeks away. Cohen a little bit longer. Like I'm just not sure. Like they're spiraling at the moment, and it's not like they're going to get three players back next week. Caputo did come back too, so and he looked good, starting straight back in the team. So they're just going to need to get, like these guys have got to get up to speed pretty quickly. I feel with their sharpness, the likes of Lecky and Tilio, because I just think this team now is like the goals have dried up for someone like Ben Mazzeo. Lawrence Wong was awesome in this game, particularly in the first half, but he's not really a guy that's going to give you a massive goal threat. Same with Harry Politides, not on a regular basis. So they're going to need these guys like not just back fit and playing, but actually providing the quality that they're actually on the contracts that they're on should be providing. Cody.
It's probably a good time for them to be coming up against the Perth side, actually, because there's a chance to maybe build up a bit of confidence. I look at those three games in all honesty. You've got two of those against the top two sides in the league, Auckland, Adelaide, both away from home as well. You're going to struggle to get results out of them. The one I think you're going to point out as well, MacArthur, that's probably the one that you go, okay, yeah, this isn't what you'd expect from Melbourne City. But, and it probably speaks to what you mentioned with the Adelaide game as well, it kind of played out in a similar way. Melbourne City really on the ball in the first half, creating a lot, just unable to find that breakthrough. But then they come out in the second half and the performance actually dips a little bit. That first half against Macarthur, Melbourne City could have been up 2 or 3-0 almost quite easily. Then they came out in the second half. Macarthur were able to get over the top of them. They didn't look like they were ready almost to restart. And Macarthur had a period of 20 minutes where they were actually had the ascendancy and they were able to take advantage of it. And then, as you said, they sit in that low block, invite a lot of pressure. And Melbourne City, to their credit, were actually able to create a lot in that back end of the second half against Macarthur. They were probably just a bit unfortunate that nothing was able to come to fruition. Whereas I think with Adelaide, it was more a case of once Adelaide scored, Adelaide were, in cruise control for the rest of the match and able to have a semi amount of control over what Melbourne City could or couldn't do. So if I look at that MacArthur game individually, yeah, there's probably an issue there. 3 games on the bounce obviously isn't where you want to be. But if you add the context of, as you said at the start, they're 3 games away from home, and as I said as well, 2 of those games are against the top 2 sides in the league. It was always going to be a difficult period for them, and we can talk about their injuries as well. They are playing with a depleted squad, and considering they're playing with a depleted squad, the performances they're putting out aren't actually that bad. I think it's just a storm that they've got to weather really, and they're coming into a period now where you've got a Perth Glory side that, as much as maybe they're getting better, are still very much beatable for Melbourne City, especially at home. And then you've got a Melbourne Derby where everything gets thrown out the window, form gets thrown out the window, nothing matters anymore. It's just about how you play in those 90 minutes. So they're probably coming into a period now where they can almost forget about what's happened in the last few weeks and actually create a new run of form for themselves as well.
Yeah, I think that the whole discussion with Melbourne City, I think that's blown like a bit out of proportion. They've won the same amount of games as Melbourne Victory, Macarthur, Sydney FC, and Western United. Like they're still a fairly decent winning side. Like I mean, they've only lost 6 games, and that might seem a lot, but 5 games, and it might seem a lot. And I would say that in previous seasons, there's probably a few games in there where if they didn't have their depleted squad, they would have earned draws out of some of those games, and it would have been looked a little bit more fondly upon. But I mean, they've got still got 11 games to play, whilst Macarthur and Sydney FC have played 17 games and only have 9 games to play. Like they've got 2 games in hand over a few of these teams. And like, yeah, I think that like this is the period where Melbourne City are going to look really dangerous. Like I can easily see them. I mean, I know it's extremely condensed between 10th and 3rd. Like it's extremely big pack, like it always is between those places in the A League. But like I can easily see them going on a run. I think that this is where their squad. I know they've been playing depleted over the last like several months, but they're going to start to get. They got Lecky back, and they're going to start to get a little bit more confidence as well with that experience in the squad. And I think they'll be just fine. Like I actually don't have. I'm not worrisome about those losses. In fact, in 2 of those games, both the Adelaide game and also the Macarthur game, I don't think they played that bad. Like I just think that they got
I disagree. I disagree with a lot of that. I think because I'm not trying to because the MacArthur and Adelaide. I mean, so Auckland. So they've lost 3 in a row, but Auckland going back there again. Like we said, no shame in losing to Auckland, and it was kind of just a crazy 15 minutes in the end of the first half that lost them the game. But they had 59% of the ball in that game, 0.65 XG created. MacArthur 64% of the ball, 0.92 XG created across the game. On Friday, 50-50 was a possession because Adelaide obviously a much better team at keeping the ball. But even so, I think if you had a look at the last 20 minutes, City probably had near on 60% of the ball. 0.52 XG created. What I'm saying is there's a trend in these last few games where it just feels like teams are starting to figure out their patterns of play a bit more. Now, the only thing I would say is with someone like Lecky coming back in, Tilio's going to come back in like from the start eventually. Caputo started his first game. So there might be a little bit of a recalibration needed with how they actually play. And maybe they need to kind of readjust with actually those guys coming back in. And maybe that's why they've struggled a little bit to create. But that's kind of what's worrying for me is that they're not creating in these games, these last few games. They're actually not creating. Now, to your point about they're not that bad performances, well, maybe because defensively they still look pretty solid. And, these are tight games. Like they've only lost 1-0 in the last 2 games. But I just think Melbourne City, the way they want to play and the way they would judge themselves always on is we're a possession-based side, we're an attacking side, we have to create chances. If we miss, who cares? I mean, Aurelio Vidmar even said after the game on Friday, yeah, we were scoring a lot of goals, then that kind of went away, probably because, like I mentioned, someone like Ben Mazzeo, for example, who was scoring goals, like he's not going to be able to keep that up throughout a whole season. He's only, 19? Still, might even be 18, Ben Mazzeo. So he's still really a young player, and that's difficult to get that consistency. But for me, is when those guys are coming back from injury, you want to still be a team that's creating and actually getting in good positions. So, look, you guys are right in the sense that this conversation could be mute next week when they, if they thrash Perth 4-0 and create a whole bunch of chances and everything's all good, and particularly with these guys coming back. I just thought basically the conversation is just flagging it because it's just a
It's
worrying.
it's worth
Yeah,
flagging. Like a side like Melbourne City, you don't expect them to lose 3 games in a row. It's not a situation you necessarily want to be in. I look at the MacArthur game, 0.92 XG. I don't think that actually does them justice in terms of the amount of pressure they were able to put on MacArthur. Maybe there were issues going into the final third. I understand that, but
yeah. XG
I
doesn't
think
factor in obviously like half chances. To be fair, like dangerous crosses. Yeah,
an XG does need a lot of context around it as well. It's something that can be useful, but it's something that you need to use in context. So like there's obviously a myriad of things that you can look at around it as well that can prove another argument. But like I said, Perth coming up next is probably coming at a good time for them. If they can't get a result against Perth, then yeah, I think that's when you start asking questions as well. Because one, that's 4 games in a row you've lost, but now you're playing sides that really should be beatable if you're not winning those games. And what are you winning exactly?
yeah. And so I was intrigued by Caputo. Yeah, Caputo came straight back in, played up front. He looked great. To be fair, on a first start, but yeah, Lawrence Wong, I mentioned there briefly. I mean, I think actually one thing because we didn't actually really talk about Melbourne City when they were doing well on the pod, and I think a lot of people were kind of surprised that they were still getting results and doing okay even with all these guys out. But for me, it wasn't as surprising because I think a lot of these young players that have come through their academy have actually been, they've been molded a certain way to play this brand of football. That's kind of the benefits of the way they're set up, Melbourne City. I think Lawrence Wong, as this really technical left-footed number 8, is like a really exciting prospect for not just Melbourne City, but like Australia potentially moving forward. Like he's clearly got it. This kid, just watching on Friday. I think the other thing too is that their pressing side of the game, like they were able to do it for one half against Adelaide, and it was still pretty good. They were aggressive. It was good. It worked really well. They threw Adelaide off their game. They just weren't able to sustain it, and that's probably something that you're going to get with young players a little bit too. Maybe not having that conditioning to to put in that amount of intensity over a 90-minute period. So yeah, I mean, I think the other thing too, look, our guy Caden has had some pretty strong comments about Callum Talbot on this podcast before. I'm going to join him. That position, whether these guys come back from injury and Nathaniel Atkinson eventually starts at right back again where he should be. Hopefully that happens. If not, I'm going to be pretty pissed because like I just don't think Callum Talbot should be near this City starting 11. He doesn't offer enough going forward. His end product is poor, and I mean Adelaide, like DeCooley came on and he was like, as soon as he went past Talbot once, he was like, "Oh, this is awesome! I can just get past this guy every single time. Give me the ball, sweet." So, like, yeah, that's another red flag for them, sort of positionally. But yeah, not look, not a concerning situation, but I just think something to flag. Like Cody mentioned it, whenever a team like Melbourne City, with their ambition, with their stature, loses 3 games in a row, I think it's worth a conversation. All right, anything for you guys to add on that?
No, no, not from me. I think that's pretty much covered. You get the result against Perth next week. I think either the conversation settles or the conversation increases. So I'm keen to see how that goes.
See
Oh,
what
I'm
happens.
just keen to see Matthew Leckie try and get back to his best as well, as he, just
Yeah,
returns to fitness from a long injury spell. Because, I think people, due to his like long injury um, outing, haven't been in the squad for quite some time. I think people have forgotten actually how good he is, and it seems to be a trend with Australian football fans who forget Matthew Leckie is an extremely good footballer. So if Melbourne City do find themselves towards the pointy end of the season, I'm intrigued to see how he performs, and I'm excited to see what he brings back to the squad.
yeah. Well, he got through 65 minutes. I'm sure that was pre-planned that they were only going to play him 65 on Friday, and I thought he looked okay, and he's probably going to ramp up a little bit more. So yeah, I second that. All right.